Well, I'm coming to the May Day rally at the Boston Common, and I see a sign in front of me which tells me I'm at the right place, a little early. Looks like an IWW poster banner.
Our pretty ugly sailors at that. We've been towards Prague for you. Yeah, please. No, I hate this morning. So I'm going to put these next big property one.
Well, we're here at the very beginning, before most people have arrived at the May Day rally on the Boston Common. Would you like to say what brings you here and what's on your mind?
Well, I was passing by on the way to a meeting with activists who are working on getting police to adopt body cameras. My organization has a bill on Beacon Hill that would mandate body cameras for police officers in order to reduce abuses on the street. And I saw a sign up that the IWW is opposed to police brutality, and so I stopped by.
Very good. What do you think it will take to actually end police brutality for real?
I think that there needs to be a change in culture such that ordinary people are willing to hold police accountable when prosecuted. There needs to be reforms to prosecutorial discretion such that they can't simply choose not to prosecute in cases of police abuse. We need to have police body cameras and citizen cameras watching what police do. And we need to undermine the attitude whereby police officers see the public as the enemy rather than as fellow citizens.
Why do you think they do see the public as the enemy?
I think that they are trained to do so and encouraged to do so by contractors who stand to make substantial profits out of militarized policing. And by a culture that tends to view people of color as inherently threatening.
Do you think it's what's the explanation for the fact that mayors appoint police commissioners who let this happen?
Well, I think that if you are part of police training and police culture, then it becomes very challenging to appoint people who have a solid track record of police experience and at the same time approach these matters in a vigorously anti-racist way.
Have you studied the history of police forces, their origin?
I have studied a fair amount about these issues, but as with any issue, it's always possible to read more and learn more.
Right. Do you think that the nature of our police, which we agree are treating people, ordinary people, as the enemy, especially the poorest, do you think that has anything to do with serving the people who want to maintain the class inequality of our society?
I think that there are heavy pressures that encourage police forces to act as muscle for the elites. And I think that we saw that happening with the Occupy protests here in Boston, where it was natural for police and for the fusion centers to conceive of the appropriateness of their role as being to suppress and disrupt those protests and to monitor them very actively, when in reality it might have been more appropriate for them to more vigorously investigate the elites and the crimes that they have committed. We see it again in the context of the Black Lives Matter protests, where I have no doubt that anyone who is involved in those will be prosecuted most vigorously and with alacrity by the authorities, when the problems that Black Lives Matter was trying to draw attention to will be prosecuted perhaps with less vigor.
Have you seen our button that says, "Let's remove the rich from power, have real not fake democracy with no rich and no poor"? What do you think about that? Good idea or bad idea?
I am a supporter of capitalism, and I have no problem with there being a degree of differential outcomes in terms of the level of prosperity that people have. But the differences in prosperity that people have should result from their choices on the basis of a society structured around genuine equality of opportunity. And we're a long way from that in the United States.
Let me put a question to you, which puts the question, I think, a little bit more sharply. Do you think that the children of a janitor and the children of a doctor should enjoy the same quality of health care, nice neighborhood to live in, vacations, healthy food, education, and so forth, or they should have different levels in those quality of life things?
I think that for the children of janitors should have access to the same quality of health care and the same quality of education as of right, and that those efforts should be publicly funded. I grew up in Britain, which has a socialized healthcare system, and benefited from it personally because my family was poor. So I have, that is part of the fundamental structure of creating a society based around genuine equality of opportunity that I was referring to. When it comes to the outcomes in society, I have no problem with with a janitor being paid less than a doctor. But I don't believe that anybody should, if they are working full-time, earn less than an income that enables them to support their family and provide for their own security and retirement.
So just to extend the doctor-janitor issue,
Right.
and their children, in what areas of quality of life is it okay for the children of a janitor to have less quality of life than the children of a doctor?
Well, if we're talking about vacations, which you mentioned,
Right.
then I think that there should be a minimum amount of vacation that every worker is legally allowed to take. And that what's more, they should have the power in the workplace that functionally enables them to take it. But there is a difference between a camping vacation and a vacation at a private skiing resort in Yellowstone or on St. Bart's in the Caribbean. And there's nothing that requires us to set up a society such that the children of a janitor have mandated access to what they do with their vacation time.
Okay, well, thank you. It's been an interesting conversation. If you want to take a look at our webpage, you can see some of the views I've been hinting at elaborated, and it's a free button. You can have it if you want it.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Take care. Hi, so we're here at the rally at the Boston Common, the May Day rally, and could I ask you to tell me what this event is and what your interest in it is and why you're here?
Well, I'm here because I've been a union leader at Boston City Hospital and Boston Medical Center for about 40 years. I'm still with the ASME and then SIU. I'm still active, pretty active member of 1199 SIU. And I've been involved in a lot of movements, like the civil rights movements, the 60s, and the Black Lives Matter movement, and the Fight for 15. So it's all coming together at this event today. It's in all over the world as well. I remember the May Day it's an international holiday that started in the United States I guess people were fighting for the 8-hour day, and police opened fire in Haymarket Square, Chicago, and killed a lot of the workers on strike, and that led to the working class holiday, called May Day. So it's celebrated all throughout the entire world. The holiday started in this country, so I've been celebrating it for a long time. My union, like 1199, is very actively supporting this as well.
I'm going to ask you what you think about PDR Boston's button, but let me just show the viewers what it says. Over here it says, "Let's remove the rich from power, have real, not fake democracy, with no rich and no poor." So I wonder if you want to tell me what you think, if that's a good idea or a bad idea.
No, I think it's a good idea. Yeah, because it's the 1% that pretty much control most of the wealth of the world. They got us into wars, and for interests of the banks and oil companies, and so it's undemocratic. It's an oligarchy, so it's not democratic at all. So I think that the people should have some kind of power in this country. It shouldn't be just for the banks. The banks, oil companies.
Now, we would say that there should be no rich and no poor, and what that means is a society and economy that's not based on money. It's based on the people who work reasonably, sharing among themselves according to need.
Yeah, that's it, I believe too. Yeah, I believe that all wealth is basically created by the labor, by the people that work.
Yeah.
And then the profits is pretty much expropriated. People are exploited, through like very low-paid jobs or wars overseas, where they take over like third world countries and control third world countries for exploit cheap labor. I know there was a thing in New Zealand. They just won a victory in around the workday. To have a regular workday in the McDonald's, in the fast food industry in New Zealand. And that was just settled on May 1st, around 12 a.m. Exactly the beginning of May 1st. It was a big victory for McDonald's workers in New Zealand, and hopefully it could spread to here in this country. We're fighting for the $15 an hour.
Right, we need an international movement to win. That's for sure.
But that was just one. Basically the beginning of May 1st.
Could I ask you for a little discussion back and forth about this idea of real democracy versus fake democracy?
Well, we don't have a democracy in this country. It's just the illusion of democracy.
Right. Let me put something, a proposal in front of you, which is what we advocate in PDR Boston. What we say is that there should be local assemblies of the people who support the principle and the values of equality and mutual aid. And everyone in the local community, local community meaning something like East Boston or Jamaica Plain, everyone who supports those values is invited to participate as an equal in the local assembly to make the laws and the policies that people in the community would be required to obey. But let me just make the key point.
I like Cuba. See, Cuba's the same thing.
But people in the local assemblies, in the local communities, are only required to obey laws made in their local assembly by the people being able to show up as equals to participate in making those laws. They are not required to obey any higher level of government. The coordination on a large scale, which is of course necessary, is achieved not by having representatives who order everybody to follow what they say, which is the current system, but by having delegates from local assemblies craft proposals which might go back and forth until there's a mutual agreement among enough local communities to implement the proposal, but they're only proposals. The delegates are not lawmakers. And this way, it's, I think, genuinely democratic because the order on a large scale is arrived at and achieved by mutual agreements, not by essentially a dictatorship of people who claim to be representatives. So I put that forward and just ask how you feel about it.
Well, I like the idea of people's assemblies and democracy from below. I like that. But I think maybe you might need some national not a government that's a repressive government, that's a dictatorship over the people. But it might need some kind of coordination, like Social Security, healthcare, things like that.
I agree. That's the purpose of local assemblies sending delegates to more regional assemblies, and they in turn sending delegates to larger area assemblies. Ultimately, it could be an assembly with delegates from all over the world making proposals that address global issues. But as I said, they are implemented by everyone lives locally somewhere, right? People are not required to obey any law that their local assembly hasn't made. And local assemblies, being reasonable, would agree to proposals that they deem reasonable.
I don't know. I mean, because there are states, like you could have assemblies in certain states that are into for lynching black people. I mean, like Troy Davis, that was legal lynching in Troy Davis. So the problem is you might have assemblies in certain areas that are very
right. Let me address that.
Very repressive.
You're right. Let me address that. The principle I'm advocating is that the local assemblies are not open to everybody. They're open to people, as I said, who share the values of equality, meaning no rich and no poor, and mutual aid. And if an assembly is, in the judgment of other local assemblies, doing something that reflects the opposite values, then the other assemblies have every right to intervene and forcibly, if necessary, even with a militia or military, prevent the so-called assembly from doing something which goes against these values. So, for instance, if people somewhere said, "Well, let's make all the black people slaves," or let's have child abuse be the basis of the economy.
Forced sterilization or different
or whatever, something like that. Then the other assemblies would say that these aren't egalitarians, these are anti-egalitarians, and we're going to stop them. Fine. But the problem is when the principle is that routinely, as the default, you must obey the higher level of government, the central government, even if you disagree. That's an open door. That's a foot in the door for an oppressive, dominating elite who capture power because all they have to do is get control of a relative handful of individuals, and then they tell the nation, "Well, you got to obey these people. They're the government."
Plus, the problem is at the national level and at the state level and all different levels of corporations control. So there is a succession movement succeeding from the federal government. But the problem is if you look at state by state by state by state, you see it's very repressive. It's like anti-immigrant so you could have a democratic process with assemblies, but it could be very reactionary. So I mean,
it's true. That's why
you need principles that are for the.
That's why the principle I'm advocating.
Anti-racist.
The principle I'm advocating is that egalitarians should exert power against anti-egalitarians. And you're describing anti-egalitarians who should be prevented from doing bad things. I agree.
Yeah, they control it locally, nationally, and internationally. In fact, they want to reorganize it. They call it globalization. They want to just control it from the top at a global level to this going on now.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you like to have a button? It's free.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I'm just saying that it still comes down to there is a dictatorship of the corporations, the banks, and that can be dealt with. It's not going to be done with just discussion.
That's why we advocate egalitarian revolution, and I hope you take a look at the webpage, pdrboston.org. I think you'll find it very interesting.
But it is a dictatorship. It can't be done within the context of the system we have now. I mean, there's tanks in college campuses like Ohio University. I mean, and there's 2 billion rounds of hollow point bullets and homeland security. They're getting ready soon for all-out war against the people on a local level and on a national level. So it's like it's not just a debate going on. It's like we have to defend ourselves, against the corporations or take our rights we have away from us.
Yeah.
Not that we have many rights now, but we got to defend ourselves and fight back against that.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. Have a good rally here.
Well, thank you.
Take care. Goodbye. So, would you like to tell me in your own words what this event is and why you're here?
Well, May Day is the anniversary of the Haymarket Riots, which is something that happened about 100 years ago. It was a protest for rights in, I believe, California. where a bunch of people were protesting and some police infiltrated the crowd and threw bombs back at themselves. They then snatched some people up from the crowds and put them on trial. They hung them immediately. That was a big farce. And so it's the anniversary of that. So it's an annual gathering for workers' rights and for that sort of thing.
And are you with an organization here?
No, I came by myself.
Okay, so you got this nice
Yep.
band
I made
sign.
it for $15
Made it yourself, okay.
from stuff from Home Depot.
So let me ask you, do you have any thing to say about what you would like society to be like?
I think that the alterations that I would make to an ideal society are too long for you to get in any interview. But to sum it up, it would be that there should be a greater equality in the distribution of wealth and an end to coercive hierarchies, which I view as unnecessary in society.
Here's our button, and it says, "Let's remove the rich from power, have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor." It's about as much as you can put on one button.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that sums it up mostly, yeah.
Okay, would you like a button? It's free.
Sure, thank you.
The webpage has got a lot of discussion about how we think an egalitarian society should be. And you mentioned no hierarchy. Mm-hmm. Can I share with you what we think is the way to have a non-hierarchical democracy?
Sure.
What we think is that in every community, by local community I mean something like Jamaica Plain, East Boston, West Roxbury, Rosendale, that kind of size, more or less. There would be a local assembly. Mm-hmm. We call it a local assembly of egalitarians, meaning a local assembly open to everyone who lives or works in that community, who supports the principles of equality, meaning no rich and no poor, and mutual aid. Mm-hmm. And every one of those people is invited to come to the assembly to write laws and policies that people in the community would have to obey. But that people in the community would not have to obey anything from a higher level of government. And there would be coordination on a large scale achieved by having local assemblies send delegates to other bodies, which you call assemblies of delegates. But these are not lawmaking bodies. These are bodies that craft proposals. And the local assemblies implement the proposal if they wish or not if they don't wish, which would mean there'd be back and forth negotiations to arrive at a mutual agreement, typically. And the local assemblies of delegates in turn could send delegates to higher level assemblies, but again, it's proposal making. Mm-hmm. So there could be even a global assembly of delegates making proposals for global relevance. But again, everyone lives locally somewhere.
Yeah.
They don't have to carry out the proposal unless their local assembly voluntarily agrees. Mm-hmm. The opposite principle, which is what we're all living under today, and including under communist countries and socialist countries, is the authoritarian principle, which is that you have to obey the highest level of government no matter what. And I think that is a foot in the door for a dominating, oppressive elite.
Yeah, I feel kind of
controlling
the same way about
people.
That. Yeah.
Of course, they do it in the name of the working class.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not really. So we agree.
Yeah.
Well, that's very nice to know. Have a good day and a good rally. Thank you. Here we are at the May Day rally, and I'm asking this gentleman what he thinks this is about and why he's here.
All right. Well, I'm personally here because it's a great day, and I love to see all the people out, supporting what they know is right, supporting their own efforts. But it's like I was saying before, it is very much May Day is like a look back on how much workers have changed their own lives through their own power, and we look to our heroes, people like Eugene Debs and Fidel Castro, and the list could go on. But it's also looking forward. We as much as we have changed, we have to change even more.
Could you elaborate on what you think society should be?
Hey, a classless society. You know, that no person should be subservient to any person, politically, economically, socially.
Now let me pick up on something you said. No person subservient to anybody politically. In PDR, we advocate egalitarianism, and what the government would be like under egalitarianism, what we consider to be genuine democracy, is that local communities, more or less the size of the neighborhoods of Boston, like Jamaica Plain or Brighton, or West Roxbury, what have you, that in local communities, all the people who share, or at least say they share the values of equality, meaning no rich and no poor, and mutual aid, are invited to participate as equals in the local assembly to write laws and policies that people in the community would have to obey. But the people in the community would not have to obey any law or policy made by any higher level of government. The higher levels of government would consist of delegates from local assemblies at various levels, but they are for the purpose of crafting proposals that the local assemblies implement or not as they wish, which would mean there would be negotiations all the time about trying to craft, mutually agreeable proposals about things. But the bottom line is that no one in a local community has to obey any law other than the ones that the egalitarians in that community, were typically the vast majority, have crafted on their own, not representatives representing them, but themselves representing themselves.
Right. The people should be their own masters.
Yeah.
We are. I mean, it's, if anything, I'm adorned in the Cuban flag. I actually got this in Havana, and it's a symbol of the fact that people can change their own destiny. We can control it. Before the revolution, Cuba was basically an American colony. I mean, it was controlled by...
Now, how do you feel about the form of government in Cuba? Is it a hierarchical or not, in your opinion?
Well, they have a better democracy than we do, let's just say that, here in the United States. It's a much more decentralized democracy. They have a unicameral legislature, but I do say they have been opening it up to people who are not in the party, to people who are religious, to people who are trans. Really, they've been eliminating the legacy of political and cultural racism and homophobia and sexism. Sure, they have some things to work on, but they're human. We're all human, and if we're going to be comparing, I would much rather have a government like Cuba than a government like the one we have here.
But ideally, you'd like one the way I described it.
That does sound pretty good.
Yeah. Would you like our button, by the way? It's free.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's got a web page. I'm pretty sure you'll find very interesting, which elaborates on these ideas a lot.
Right. Okay. I like that. But really, you're right, like, the same sort of thing. There should be no poor, should be no more rich people. I mean, to have like, differences in pay is one thing, but to have a not living wage is.
Well, one of the things that we advocate economically is that no rich and no poor, what that really implies is a society not based on money in the first place. It's
yes. Yeah.
Based from each according to ability to each according to need.
Oh, of course.
Are you aware that Karl Marx was opposed to making society based on that principle? I should explain what I mean.
Yeah.
In his critique of the Gotha program, he popularized a phrase. It actually was coined before he was born by a Frenchman, but he popularized it. That's why it's associated with Karl Marx. His version was from each according to his ability to each according to his need. We dropped the his.
Yeah. Of course.
But
women hold up half the sky.
But the paragraph in which he introduces the phrase, the point of his paragraph is that society cannot be based on this principle until long after communism, which of course comes long after socialism, which of course comes after capitalism, and that his point was to tell his readers not to think about making society be this way in the lifetime of even their great-great-grandchildren.
Well, there is a point to that, though. I mean,
let me just interject that
sure, yeah.
that society was formed according to the principle from each according to ability to each according to need in many villages, and went very far in that direction in about half of Spain in 1936 to 39.
Well, I mean, there have been many successful experiments in socialism and in communal living. Really, one thing that I am excited about, I don't want to get off track, is the blockade being lifted from Cuba. Hopefully will help make them more self-sufficient. But
have you been to Cuba?
yes, I actually got this in Havana.
How long were you in Cuba?
Just a few weeks. I was. It was a college course with Professor Chomsky, Aviva Chomsky. She's brilliant. She really, she's been. I mean, she's been there for. She's been going for a couple decades. But anyway, yeah, we went and we went to Havana. We went to Matanzas. Unfortunately, we didn't get to go to many other places, but got to talk to a lot of locals, and got to actually talk to a couple of people who were in the National Assembly for the People's Power. Talked to many.
Now, according to my little research online, inequality is actually increasing in Cuba, not decreasing.
Well, I mean, sometimes it really depends upon what you read. But in terms of like they are, political openness is increasing. Inequality is actually increasing economically.
That's
because of capitalism. They are having some the easing on some of the more capitalist things, like, for instance, there are private businesses, there are private restaurants and things. Tourism is actually one of the things that creates this inequality, because you can make more money getting tips.
And that'll increase now that the embargo is off, right?
It will increase. That is one thing, but that really is up to everyone to remedy. I mean, it's not. It's a problem, but they'll get their trade back. It's you get one for the other. I mean, it's the blockade has made life a lot harder. I mean, they lost 80% of their trade with the blockade, and it's. I mean, sure, the inequality will increase, but in that terms, because right, you can make more money serving European tourists than you can, in a certain any other job. Like if you I don't know, for instance, don't take my word on this, but like if you're a doctor or something, not necessarily, but you just make a lot more than, like, say, your basic salary. I mean, because the average salary is about $20 a month in Cuba, and but they have services that we don't have. They have free education, free housing, they have free healthcare, and a pretty egalitarian political system. But right, like Cuba has some problems. I mean, they're not communist yet. You say, oh, they're communist. Oh, it's a communist dictatorship. No. There's no such thing as a communist dictatorship.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing all your thoughts and experiences, and hope you enjoy the rally.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Take care. Goodbye.
You have to be quiet.
So, would you like to tell me what this event is and why you're here?
Well, I'm here at May Day in Boston today because an American tradition, a worldwide tradition, needs to be upheld. Here in the belly of the beast, here in the engine of the capitalist system, American workers are under greater and greater exploitation every day. and yet the trade union movement refuses to use its great potential strength. We need to revitalize unions, and we need to build a mass movement of the working class in order just to make the gains to start with that a lot of European workers enjoy, but to move beyond that, past the capitalist economy to a socialist economy where people work for the common benefit and receive the benefits of that great common benefit.
Okay. Can I ask you what your thoughts are about how society ought to be? What should the government be like? And are you for socialism?
Well, I am for socialism,
And
yes.
so in a socialist society, what would the government be like?
What would the government be like? Well, ultimately, the government would be administration rather than this, this brutal state that we have now. When you and your roommates find a couch on the sidewalk, and you have a hall meeting, a room meeting about what you're going to do with it. That's government, but it's government without coercion. It's government without compulsion. It's not about trying to appropriate wealth for the people who create it. It's about how to divide up the great bounty that we have.
Would there be laws?
Ultimately, society can take care of itself. People are smart. One of the great myths of capitalism is that people can't take care of themselves and that we need these top-hatted, monocled, ultra-rich overseers.
So there would not be laws?
I think society can work on a much more sensible basis than that. And when you write laws down, you're creating opportunities for the people who write the laws, and that's all.
Would there be elected representatives?
At first, yeah. But in the long run, how fed up about this, how stuffy about this do you need to make it? The only reason why we have these representation systems is to claw compromises out of the wealthy. To get rid of the wealthy, you don't need to get compromises out of them. We are all capable of, intrinsically, we're all capable of democracy. Any one of us can argue for our own selves, for our own benefit, and for our collective benefit. If we are all operating in good faith, then we don't need structures and bureaucracy and so on and so on. What we need is consensus.
What about if there are some people who are not operating in good faith?
Well, how did society operate before we had the
I don't know. I wasn't there.
I wasn't there either, but the archaeologists tell us that a society without kings, without military is certainly possible. It's the vast majority of human history was spent in this state. What they didn't have was the benefits of modern society. I mean, I don't want to roll back the clock 7,000 years ago. I like having access to vaccines. But there's nothing fundamentally different about humans. There's nothing in our nature that says that we can't govern ourselves and look out for each other.
Okay. Are you speaking sort of individual thoughts, or does this represent socialist alternative?
I'm a member of Socialist Alternative. We are a socialist organization in the tradition of Marx and Lenin and Trotsky. But our pictures of what the socialist world would look like are all individual. It's something I think about a lot because I've been on the receiving end.
Let me just explore what the vision of socialism is in your opinion. In California in 2008, 70% of African Americans voted yes to ban same-sex marriage. They voted for Proposition 8. Would people like that under socialism have a fully equal say, and if they're the majority, they would make the policy?
Well, I think you're asking the question in a very weird way, because democracy is about more than voting. Democracy is about education and mutual support. It's possible to hand-wavily dismiss, well, this set of workers clearly isn't with the program, and so we'll ignore them. No. The fact is, these sort of reactionary ideas, these very scary ideas, don't appear out of the vacuum. They're fed to us by a mass media in service of the rich.
So
no one is born homophobic. No one is born racist. The whole idea.
What would happen under socialism if the majority of the people had these what you call reactionary homophobic ideas?
Again, you're asking the question in circles.
Why is
because
it circles?
Socialism. Engels said socialism is the doctrine of the conditions of the liberation.
What if we had socialism today?
Well, what if we had socialism today, then there wouldn't be homophobia. There wouldn't be racism. A socialist society that has evolved past the need for a state, past the need for kings and queens and presidents and all this.
Let me see if I just understand. Is socialism is incompatible with 70% of African Americans?
No. That is a distortion of what I said.
Well, I'm just asking for what you said. Go ahead, explain.
Socialism is incompatible with homophobia. Socialism is incompatible with racism. As long as you still have racism, as long as you still have sexism, as long as you still have these forms of oppression, you don't have socialism yet.
So let's do a little change.
So could there be? Let me ask you this question. In your way of thinking, could there be a fully socialist society in which the majority of people think that same-sex marriage is a bad idea?
I can't hear you over the chanting. Sorry.
Could there be a socialist society in which the majority of people think same-sex marriage is a bad idea and ban it?
Well, by definition, no. Like I just said, homophobia is incompatible with socialism.
Okay.
Part of the construction of a socialist society is the destruction of all these divisive forms of hatred and ignorance.
So all those African Americans who voted that way were homophobic.
I think that people were taught homophobia. I'm not going to single out African Americans. I think it's a very unfair way to formulate that question.
Well, it's just a striking statistic. It was 70% voted for it.
It's a striking statistic that it was voted on and all. It's a striking statistic. The idea that people's right to associate with each other is something that's put up for a vote, controlled by an oppressive capitalist regime.
Let me ask you a related question. At least I think it's related, although it seldom is coupled in the public discourse with the same-sex marriage question. How do you feel about say a woman using an anonymous sperm donor to conceive a child who will deliberately be conceived in a way that the child will not know his father will not know and be known by his father? Do you think that is okay, or do you have a problem with it, or how do you feel about it?
Well, ultimately, reproduction is down to the choice of the reproducer, isn't it? I'm not going to tell a woman what she's going to do with her body.
So you would not object to that. What about from the point of view of the child? Is there a problem there?
All through history, there have been children who haven't known who their fathers are.
So, okay, well, I guess you answered my question. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I think you need to ask some questions about yourself, frankly.
That I have a problem for being concerned about that consumption issue.
Why are you singling out African American voters? Why are you singling out African American?
I'll tell you why. It's a fair question.
Stop interrupting me. Why are you singling out African American voters when, presumably, you know the problem is systemic? That even the category of African American.
I'll tell you why.
Stop interrupting me. When even the category of African American or white or Asian or all these are constructed as means of dividing us all against each other.
Am I allowed to talk now?
You're allowed to talk whenever it's civil to do so.
I mean, I'm not interrupting you.
And actually, in their struggle for the 8-hour day,
the left generally considers African Americans to be the more progressive part of the population for understandable reasons. You know, they've been oppressed more sharply and haven't. Wait, now you're interrupting.
Yes, I know, because you just said something nonsensical. You're dividing up workers against each other again.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
The descendants of slaves have a different experience than the descendants of people who are not.
That Barack Obama is a great progressive.
Listen, the people who are descendants of the slaves.
And a lot of, by the way, African Americans are not descendants of slaves. There's been immigration throughout the history of this country.
You're right, but most African Americans in the United States.
The American working class.
Many African Americans in the United States are the descendants of slaves.
Okay. Now we're back on the basis of fact. Go on.
And African Americans tend to be poorer on average than non-African Americans. And African Americans tend to be oppressed more sharply than non-African Americans by the police.
You're still formulating this blindly of class, but go on.
And employers. And that is why many on the left, maybe not you, tend to recognize that African Americans tend to understand
working class African Americans,
as most are. tend to understand the nature of class conflict a little bit more sharply, a little bit more clearly, having experienced the dirtiest end of the stick of class conflict more on average. And so that's why I think it's interesting that this particular demographic voted in a way that most people on the left, which I do not count myself as a leftist, but most people on the left...
Sorry, you don't count yourself as a leftist? Why are you wearing that let's remove the rich from power button?
Because this is for egalitarianism, not leftism.
Okay, so
the
you
fact
don't consider removing the rich from power
the fact that we are having this disagreement is why I don't consider myself a leftist. But let me
Okay, so you're in support of separating African Americans from the rest of society.
I'm not separating
then why
people.
are you singling them out?
You asked me a question.
African American voters in
You asked
California
me why I cited a particular statistic.
Yeah, and it's still bizarre. You still haven't answered the question.
And the answer is that this is a statistic which, in the leftist point of view, is somewhat paradoxical. That's why.
I think you're sort of you're painting leftists with an incredibly broad brush here. I think you need to do your research a bit.
Well, by leftists, I mean people who are mainly inspired and followed Marxism.
Again, I think you're overgeneralizing here.
Well, okay.
It's a philosophy that's 170 years old or so.
I also mean by leftists people who tend to view people who are opposed to same-sex marriage as reactionary, as wrong-headed.
Reactionary view.
And I think many of them have perfectly valid reasons.
It's a reactionary view.
Yeah.
No, and they don't have valid reasons to oppose it. Homophobia is intrinsically invalid.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think you really need to examine how you came to these conclusions on your own. I think you really need to examine your attitudes about African Americans.
Okay.
Mi canto es una cadena sin principio ni final. Y en cada eslabón se encuentra el canto de los demás. El canto de los demás. This you can clap to if you can follow it. It's not easy.